everybody. Welcome to Down to Earth with Harriet Kimmick. And you happen to be joining us midday, which is rather unusual. It's rather unusual for us. But for you out there in podcast land, you wouldn't know the time or the date because you might be listening to this while you are asleep, while you're laying down in bed, and you perhaps are having some thoughtful dreams, and you say, hey, let me go hear what Harriet had to say today. That's the convenience of being able to listen in on a podcast. The thing I like about podcasts is that it's radio that is never off, to be honest with you. And it's remarkable because it's sort of like having your favorite radio host on demand, right? So you can listen to me anytime of the day or night, wherever you are in the world. You just need Wi Fi. Just connect to Wi Fi, right? And when you connect to Wi-Fi, make sure that you connect to Wi-Fi and you put you put yourselves in a position where you can hear us. So I really, 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 really appreciate that. I like the fact that you can listen in at a time whenever it's convenient. I mean, let's face it, today's world is busy. We're driving in the car. If you have Spotify as one of the apps in your entertainment system of the car, certainly tune in to Down to Earth with Harriet Kamek. If it isn't Spotify, perhaps you have Apple Podcasts. Maybe it's Google, whatever it is. But thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for joining us because podcast is really the best thing they could have ever invented because it's radio on demand. It's like just being able to listen to your favorite show on demand. Well, today's Tuesday. It's the 24th of September. And there's a lot to talk about. Like, simply, there's a lot to talk about. I'm looking at myself and I'm like, I am so amazed at the stuff, the political rhetoric that has emanated since yesterday. Have you guys been watching the news or anything like that? It's unbelievable. So I wanted to talk about Greta Thunberg. This is a 16-year-old young lady and I say young lady because she's 16. She's someone's child who is from Sweden and who is sort of the president of climate change for her generation. So she was sent to New York to talk about climate change. And at first it was fascinating. Everybody became fascinated with this young person's perspective and how she delivered and so on. So the media made a big deal out of it, as usual. And in making a big deal out of it, they kind of pushed her into a forum where she's perhaps not emotionally mature enough yet to handle. Because when you start calling on world leaders and when you start calling on people who are accustomed to picking on people who call on them, then I'm afraid that's what you get. So they kind of pushed her into a realm that she's not ready for. She hasn't been groomed for. So yesterday, she gave an impassioned speech at the UN about climate change. I thought her words could have been better tuned, if you know what I mean. I mean, I thought it was a bit too sharp because to say that. Maybe in her culture that's how people speak, but certainly here in America it came off as abrasive. Her words were too sharp. You can't look at people and say you're not mature enough, especially when you are not the mature one. You're 16 and you're looking at people who are older. I found that disconcerting. And I think that we need to address that. That's the first thing. Her content, though truthful and based on scientific fact, she hasn't been schooled yet that you focus on the content, right? You focus on the content of your delivery as opposed to the emotion. She was very emotional. I don't think though that you are going to get any other kind of reaction from some of these people, especially here in America, than you are getting, simply because she did come after people. So you have to take it and deal with it because that's what comes with the territory. Now, if I'm going to go after any leader, I expect that they're going to come back after me. That's just fair game, right? That's fair game. So that's what happened with her. So nobody ought to say, well, he went after a 16-year-old child. The 16-year-old child went after every leader. She went after everybody who is older than her. And while she might have truth to what she's saying, I don't disagree that we need to do something about climate change. I don't disagree that we have kind of dropped the ball on climate change. But what I do disagree on is what? Is the way in which you deliver that. There's always delivery. So we can't condone what she says, but at the same time tell our own children that our own children need to change what they say. Do you see what I'm saying? We can't just do that. That just does not, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't fly, right? Right. We do have problems with climate change. Yes. Everybody's not going to believe it. Most people don't. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think it's hokey pokey and it is whatever. You and I, though, tend to think that there is some credibility to it when we are faced with the science of it. However, delivery is everything, right? Delivery is everything. And I suspect she has a ways to go in learning that. So the folks who are coaching her, I suspect they were just as alarmed at the words. I'm pretty sure they gave her a speech to say with words to deliver. And as usual, you stick to the content, right? You stick to the facts, right? So all kinds of stuff is going on. That's as much political as I'm going to get today. I'm just going to leave the rest of it, right? But I wanted to talk today about a film, a docuseries I watched on Netflix on Friday evening. You can tell I was quite relaxed this past weekend. And truthfully, I wasn't feeling well. And so I kind of I settled down a little bit early on a Friday evening, and I came across this docuseries on Netflix, and it says Inside Bill Gates' Mind. And at first, like everyone else in the world, you are curious about Bill Gates. He's the founder of Microsoft, the largest tech company, right? The largest computer company. And it has stayed strong for decades now. So it didn't peter off and disappear into Netscape. Microsoft is still Microsoft, right? Still innovating, changing the way we use computers, changing the way we use technology, bringing new ideas to us. So of course, everybody is curious. Well, what goes on in Bill Gates' mind? I mean, what was he thinking when he wrote the code that powers our personal computers? And what was he thinking when he wrote the codes and because now we know that it's code, it's computer code. That's the lingo of text, right? What powers, where did he come up with those ideas? So the docuseries focused on where he is now. It did examine where he came from. So it did tell us how he got started. He started, much to our surprise, he started really, really early, right? And he started really, really early because we didn't know we didn't know where he started. So he started early. Is that a surprise to you? I don't think so. I have found that most people who are successful started early. They started at their craft really early. That's what Bill Gates did. He started really early from he was in middle school. He was identified. He was in a school system where they identified his genius very early and where they placed him in situations that challenged him. I think that's part of what's wrong with our educational system today. It's too easy. We don't place our children in situations that challenge them. So our children are not challenged. Our children are not constantly being in a place where they're challenged. It's kind of like just give them something and they memorize it. And so there's no creativity. So everybody, graduates school and they're told, oh, okay, you're going to go to college and then you're going to be a worker bee. And nobody's creating anything or being innovative. Where's the innovation? Where did innovation go? Well, that's what we found out with Bill Gates. So while he was in middle school and then he matriculated to high school, he went to a private school because his parents were well off. That's full disclosure. He's not pretending now. His father was a lawyer. His mom was a stay-at-home mom. She sat on boards in the community and got paid for it and so on. His father was a lawyer and the mayor of the town they grew up in, right? So he didn't have to strive really hard economically. He didn't have that to deal with. He just had to focus on what he thought he was born to do. And he thought he was born to do computers. And he stayed with that. He didn't digress. He dropped out of Harvard because he thought he could succeed, because he and his friend Paul and his other friend Steve, they had been working on this project from they were in middle school. So they developed an idea, moved to Arizona, right? Moved to all the way down to Arizona and figured out how they could get this project going. And years later, we have what is called Microsoft. There was a time when Microsoft, when Windows, anybody remember Windows 95? It was a stampede to buy Windows 95 to run it on your PCs. That's when PCs were built to last, right? What a novel idea, right? So they built Windows 95, installed it on your PC, and there you had Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Microsoft Publisher, and Excel. To be honest with you, to this day, I still think that was the best software program ever, Windows 95. I got so much done. I fooled around with Microsoft PowerPoint. I became a zen on it. I mean, I knew the stuff. I mean, I knew it. And Microsoft Excel, wow, what a remarkable thing. You could put everything on a spreadsheet and it would automatically calculate. That was amazing for those of us who had to run numbers and for those of us who were in charge of reporting mechanisms, right? And so then Windows 98, just a little tweaking a little bit, and Windows 2000, and then it just kept going and going and going. So eventually, Bill Gates retired from Microsoft. He resigned. He was no longer CEO. He gave over management of the company because it had become so big. And now he left it. So, what has Bill Gates done since he left Microsoft? Do you think that he went to play golf on a golf course and flew around the world and was hightailing it with women one after the other? Nope. Do you think he went on a binge partying and just sailing on his yacht in the Mediterranean with women here, women there, guy over there, girl over there? Nope. Do you think he went scouting the Himalayas? Nope. What do you think Bill Gates has been doing? He and his wife Melinda formed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, dedicated to providing resources to people in the world who don't have it. That's how they started. At first, they never focused on America because they didn't think their own country needed it. They thought people in other developing countries needed it. But this year, they announced that they're now going to focus. They're not going to give money away overseas anymore. They're going to focus right here in America. They're going to help fill what we would refer to as gaps in services, right? Fill in where education, where the public school system fails, and where healthcare has dropped off. They have decided to give money back. Now, the reason I'm talking about Bill Gates is because in the docu series that I watched, a couple of things jumped out at me. One, of course, was his incredible work ethic. And I feel like some of us who want to be successful, we need to recognize that you're not going to get anywhere if you don't work at it. Somebody said to me the other day recently, well, how did you get to where you are? And I'm like, you have no idea. I worked a full-time job plus worked. When I got home, I never quit. I did the work and put the work in. Right? Right. I made the contacts. I was up late at nights. In fact, I'm still up late at nights doing what I am supposed to be doing, thinking, strategizing, because I'm at the stage where you have to think things through. What are your next steps? So it's no surprise, is it, that Bill Gates is successful because he's a workaholic. He works hard. So he's not retired per se, in the sense that he's staying home playing golf or on the couch flicking channels. He just found another way to work. So he and his wife formed Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he decided to be hit on two projects. Now, this is how you know that a man really needs a wife, right? Because his wife was watching TV one day and she saw a mother with a baby, and the baby was dying because the baby had diarrhea. And she looked down and said to her husband, if I lived in one of those countries and I had a baby, Would my baby die from diarrhea? And her husband said, well, what's the problem? So she said, they don't have clean water. He said, well, let's look at it. He went to work. The man got up and went to work. He began to study. This is how you become successful, people. You do your research. Before he made a grand announcement, he went and did all the research. He met with all the people in the world about clean water. He tried to understand the problem. So not only did he go on the ground, he hired people on the ground. He hired experts because he had the money. He decided to put his money to good use. And he hired experts who could tell him why there was not clean running water in some of these countries. It will shock you because you're going to find that you think you have it bad here in America. You should hear what people are drinking water that they just peed and pooed in, that dumps into a lake, dumps into the sea, and that same water is where they go to take water out to go cook and to drink. No wonder people were having diarrhea, right? So they pee up there, poo up there, and then the water runs down, and they go and catch the water down there because somehow they think that when the water runs, all the germs run out of it. Not so, right? So you think you have problems here in America? No, we don't. No, we don't, right? And so he started to think, well, how can we create fresh running water? Out of that evolved, you have to watch the docu-series to see it. Out of that evolved a whole litany of experts and experts and experts. It took him years, but he got it done though. He figured it out. He got experts together, brought people together, went to some of his friends, told them to put their money where their mouth is, and got them to believe as he did to try and fix this problem. Dig it? Dig it. You want to be successful? Think like Bill. You want to be successful? Go be like Bill. Figure out where the problem is, what it needs, and think it through. So then, a lot of the water filtration systems were not working or couldn't work because the countries did not have the resources such as energy. Mind blowing. Energy was too expensive. So they would have the water treatment plants, but the power to keep it going did not work. What do you think he did? He said, well, how can we provide renewable energy that is affordable on the ground to the people, that won't cost the country a lot to implement, that will fix that problem? Do you see? It went from a child dying from diarrhea to solving a whole country's ecosystem problem in providing energy. Mind blowing. The man's mind is amazing. He sat there and as usual, he did all the research. I think he reads 100 books a year, right? He has books on top of books. He read everything he could on energy. He got all the experts together because he can pay them. And he put them all in a room and he said, figure it out. And while they're trying to figure it out, he already has an idea of, he says, what if we do it this way? This is their expertise. This is their field. And he says, what if we do it this way? They say, yes, Mr. Gates. Well, if we do it this way, this is what would happen. And he allowed it. He came this close to doing it, and just at the moment when he was getting China involved, the trade war erupted. That disrupted the whole thing, and everybody just kind of just like, okay, after 5 years of putting in all that work, the trade war happened, and you have to comply with government regulation, and the government of the United States is not talking to the government of China, and China is not going to do anything because it might impact regulations and blah, blah, blah. And that's what's damaging. But you know what I want you to focus on? I want you to focus on the fact that the man did not retire, that inside his mind are solutions. I have found in life that the greatest thing that you can do for yourself is having some quiet time to think. You know, one of the problems that we have in today's world, you know why we get sick so frequently, headaches and so on, and all these stresses that bring heart disease and acid reflux and all that kind of stuff. You know what it is? You know where it comes from? Think. We do not sit still long enough. We are constantly moving in our fast-paced modern life. As Bill Gates said, it takes energy to power our modern life. For us to live in this modern world, America, it's safe to say that America is at least, 250 years ahead of most other countries in the world. Like, we have a 250-year head start, I would safely say, in terms of resources, right? We are ahead of most countries. That's why we are the leader. That's why we're the first world country, right? And it's fair to say that because it is a reality, right? So, how did we get to this point? We need energy to run our modern life. Our modern life is consumed with energy. I mean, you have to turn the lights on. You're hearing me right now because you have energy. You had to charge your phone. The podcast platforms that broadcast me had to have power systems to power their servers, right? Right. You need energy to turn your TV on, to turn your app on, right? So you can watch television or you can watch it through something on your phone. You need energy to get ready in the mornings to go to work. You have to turn the lights on. You need hot water. You need to get your coffee. The street lights work. You have to go downstairs, catch the subway, the train. That's modern life, right? So he sat there and he thought the matter through. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to win and if you want to figure out how you're going to solve problems, think on these things. Think again. The Bible even says it. Think on these things. Think. The key word there is think. We're not spending enough time thinking because we're too busy. We're distracted a lot. When we do power down at night, we go to bed with all of the issues of the day uppermost and top of mind. Guess what? We're not winning because we're not powered down. You literally, your brain is a computer. You literally have to think of your brain as a supercomputer and that it is its own CPU. You remember what a CPU is? Central Processing Unit. Anybody remember the days of desktop computers? I guess you kids don't know that because our tablets and interfaces that are screen based, right? But we used to have something called a CPU, Central Processing Unit, that was actually your computer, right? Your brain is your CPU. It is the center of your work and your network. To feed your brain, you have to sleep, you have to eat, and guess what? You have to rest. When you are well rested, you can think things through. Half the times we are reactive to situations instead of being proactive. We react to them because we haven't thought them through. We're not proactive in thinking and anticipating. The thing with Bill's brain is that before he executes any task, he thinks it through. Even with his wife, Melinda, before he married her, he thought it through. What were the pros and the cons? Kid you not, that's what she says. He actually get a white paperboard and said, what are the pros and cons of getting married? And once he added it up, it was more to get married than not. How many of us, if we did that, we would have married the right person and we would have stayed married? I kid you not. In examining our lives today, if we were to really sit back and to really look at the reasons why we got married and what are the reasons we should stay married, many of us would never divorce. You'd say, you fool around, but listen, let's not get divorced. I kid you not. Because why? But we become so emotional, we become so heated, then our egos get involved, and then we're like, forget it, I don't need you. You don't have to be here, blah, blah, blah. And you divorce, and it takes you years to recover. Because you have to recover financially, and the biggest loss is your emotional loss because you were emotionally involved with the person, and now you're out here flailing. So you move from one broken thing to another because you're still dealing with the first one. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? Right? So what I'm saying is we need to start thinking. That's the first thing I learned about Bill's mind. Before he did anything else, before he executes, he thinks. The second thing he does is research. He gets all the experts in the room. So you want to figure out how are you going to be an actress or an actor? What you're going to do? You're going to get the experts. So you're going to find out the best actors of all time, the best actresses. You're going to do all the research on them. Then the next thing you're going to do is formulate a plan. You got a plan. What's your plan to become an actor or an actress? Let me ask you this. If you were CEO of your life and you had to figure out how are you going to get you from dream to reality, what would you do? You have to have a plan. You have to have a plan to sustain it, a plan to implement, a plan to execute, and a plan to sustain. Many of us fail not at the plan to implement. We fail at the plan to execute. It starts failing from there, and then it fails. Sometimes we tell ourselves that we're just going to make it up as we go along. And some people have achieved success because they just got lucky. To Bill's mind, he says it was just pure luck. He said he was lucky to be born into the family he was born into. That gave him a good platform and a good plateau to start from. But he also said he was lucky that some of the stuff that happened to him, he was just blind luck. I don't know that I give a lot of credence to that, because if luck is what it is, I haven't had many luck. I haven't had a lot of good luck. So I'm not sure that luck is the cornerstone of success, or one of the cornerstones of success. But I admit that incredible planning and thinking is what I have observed from people like him. One of the things that emerged out of this conversation with him was that he doesn't believe that there is another planet with life out there. So he doesn't think Elon Musk is is correct in they're going to build a planet. Everybody's going to go up there because this planet will be done. No, most people, the real scientists of the world, they think this is it. They think this is the planet. And that if we focus on keeping this planet, then we will sustain life for the next 150, 200 years. They're thinking generationally, which is far different, right? Which is far different from how a lot of people look at situations. It's far different from how most of us view. I mean, a lot of us, we don't even think generationally. We think right here, right now. This is how come people end up in trouble, right? This is how people end up end up just thinking of the now and end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes people will even end up in the wrong beds. Hey, y'all know it's true, right? People end up in the wrong beds because you don't think. We're not thinking. The most important thing, the most important takeaway there that I learned was thinking inside Bill's mind. It's fascinating. Now, you would think that for someone who is completely focused on technology, what on earth does energy have to do with technology? Where does all this where does what does energy and clean running water factor into technology? You know what? It just goes to show you the diversity of one's mind. As far as he's concerned, it's all interlinked. There is not one block over the other. There are some leaders who think that things exist in a vacuum. Bill Gates doesn't think anything exists in a vacuum. He thinks there's a reason for everything and there's an interconnectedness. And what he strives to do is to find the commonality or the connection to everything else. Isn't that kind of revolutionary and mind blowing? Right? Isn't that kind of like how it should be? Right? So go figure. So you have people who are still sitting on their couches and who haven't gotten started yet. You have this wonderful dream. You have this great idea, but you're still sitting there. You might be listening to this while you're sitting at your cubicle. You might even be paused right now trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? Well, Harriet, how do I get from what I'm thinking to where I want to be? Well, you have to have a thought. You have to think this whole thing through. You have to think all the variables through, and you have to think the whole thing through. And you know the next thing that you have to be prepared for? It is going to take you time. This is Harriet Kemick. Join me again on Down to Earth with Harriet Kemick. Right? And what I have found is that for most of us, right? What I have found is that for most of us, we do not spend some time thinking. So at the end of this, you know what I'm going to ask you to do? You know what's coming next, right? You are going to get pen and paper. And you're going to write the vision out. Everything starts small. Nothing in this life, nothing that is big today started big. It all started small. You have to be prepared to work hard. That means you can't give up. That means even when you feel like giving up, even when others don't support you, even people who said they were going to help you stop helping you because they're afraid that you will become more successful than they are. Even when that is the case, you still can't give up on yourself. You have to persevere in spite of. So, what came out of Bill? I found that he's a great thinker. I found that he's a hard worker. He's dedicated and committed. These are characteristics that I think we all should embody and employ. These are characteristics that if we follow them, we can't lose. Say lose, can't lose. These are the kinds of things that if we follow them, we cannot lose. I found just by I sat there and mind you, he's been a fascinating character most of my life, right? And I have watched him progress through Microsoft and I've admired his successes. But this was the first time I've read stories about him because it's fascinating. But this was the first time that I said, but wait a minute, I've always wondered, how did he come up with this idea? There were some similarities. We both read a lot. That was one. We both commit to our hardworking. He works harder than I did. He spent all day, all night. I'm kind of like a mother, so I have to cook and do all that kind of stuff, right? And wife. There was at one point in my journey when I was a wife and a mother at the same time, and I had to do that. But he was dedicated. Even when he failed, he would just start right over again. If he wrote a code and it didn't work, he'd start right over. He'd figure out what happened and start right over. But he didn't stop. He persevered and he worked hard. He worked night and day to build Microsoft. Microsoft is where it is today because somebody believed in it so much and believed in the power of that idea that they gave their life and worked night and day to build it. Of course, it was attacked by jealous people, of course, because people just sat back and said, oh, well, he's too big, he's monopolizing and so on. And you're like, well, if you have the best product out there, you are going to be a monopoly. Look at Apple and Google phones. Do you see anybody else coming up making phones? No, because those two are the best, right? Right. Right. But do you see what I mean? He did not quit. He did not give up. And he stayed in the game. How many of us do that? Not many. For most of us, we quit halfway. Man, it's too hard. Let me stop. I'm just gonna go back to my little cubicle and my little plant job and just stand right here. For most of us, what we did was we stayed in the game, right? And we did what we did was we stayed in the game and kept going. I remember days I would stay up and I would go to work. I had 2 children in 2 different school districts, and I would go to work and drive around and go from one place to the other. And then I would pick them up 2 children in 2 different school districts, drop them off, then went back to work, then come home and work for myself. That's what my daughter used to call it. She says, now is the time when mommy works for herself. I'd spend up 6 to 8 hours staying up from 6 o'clock in the evening until 1 o'clock in the morning. And I would stay up to learn how to be a better writer, how to broadcast and ways. And those were the early days of the internet. How do I market myself? I spent hours going through different pages, web pages, figuring it out. Nothing comes easy, my friends. Nothing comes easy. There is a price to pay. And the price is high, but it's worth it in the end. So if you find yourself struggling, and if you find that you have a dream and you are dedicated to your craft and you believe in the power of your idea, you believe that your idea is something out of you, along the way you are going everyone is not going to understand what drives you. As Bill said, the one person he wants to thank is his wife. She did not leave. She stayed with him because she understood. And he said part of the success was he chose someone who was similar to him. She liked science. She liked math. So when he was talking, she could relate. And she understood how his mind worked. It also helped, as far as I'm concerned, that he was, he stayed in the game with her. He didn't shut her out, even though he worked long hours and was away from home for long periods. And sometimes, as a woman, you don't know really what's going on. You think that he's out because he's with someone else, and he probably has someone else with him. But he hastened to reassure her, and that's the key. He hastened to reassure her that we're in this thing together. I say to you, find the best partner. If you have a partner who is staying with you through thick and thin, you commit to that person. You let them know that they're important to you. Some of us don't have that luxury, and you find people and they don't want to commit, and they don't want to stay with you. They're not committed to the idea, even if they don't believe in the idea. Even if they're not sure, they're like, well, I trust you and I'm here for you. That's all that needs to be said. I trust you and I'm here for you. Sometimes you go to your partner and you hash out an idea, you discuss an idea, you ratify it, you talk about it and listen to it. And you're like, okay, well, I see where this is going. But sometimes you have a partner who just does not understand you at all and tells you to shut down. There's another couple whom I admire. Uh, what's his name? Jakes, the bishop. Bishop Jakes. I can't remember his first name. Bishop Jakes. Do we even know his first name, or we just call him Bishop Jakes? I don't even know. Bishop Jakes and his wife, Sarita, I think. He used to tell stories in the early days of how they came up. And he used to say that his wife understood what drove him, and she stayed home. And it was his job to go out and find the money. And she didn't leave. She washed even his jackets in the washing machine because they couldn't afford to take them to the cleaners. And she stayed because he committed to her. If you find a partner who is supportive, commit to that person. Because here's the thing, you can't afford to be distracted by the fact that you have to focus more on what this person needs when you really need the time to think. So you need to find a partner who is on equal footing with you, who understands you, so that you can commit to them, so you can spend your time thinking, because thinking is where you win. You're going to outlast the competition, and you're going to surpass the competition because you think and anticipate while they're sleeping, while they're fighting with their spouses, while they're fighting with their board, while they're fighting with this. Think on these things. The second thing you need to do is to have a plan of implementation. You have to start somewhere. And most of us say, yeah, you got to start somewhere. But where are you starting? Sometimes I have found it's not where you start and how you start, it's how you finish. Dr. Ben Carson is a renowned neurosurgeon today, but he started in the hood in Detroit. If that were to predict where he would end up in a hood somewhere. But instead, he's now one of America's renowned neurologists. Interesting, isn't it? It's not about where you start. What matters is how you finish. Microsoft started in Bill Gates' mother's garage, in his parents' garage. His mother believed in him, and after a year of Harvard, he dropped out, and his mother believed. And she supported him. She gave him the funding, the seed money to start, because she believed. Look where Microsoft is today. It's not about where you start. What matters is how you finish. Finish well. Dedicate yourself to your craft. You have to work at it. And listen to me very carefully. There are things to learn along the way. Bill Gates didn't become Bill Gates overnight. He had to learn about management and business, things he never knew about before. He knew about coding, he knew about computers, but he had to learn management and business. And there's a key component between the two. What is that? I bet you can guess it. People. Now, that might have been a walk. That was not a walk in the park for him. He had to learn, right? Because creative people tend to be very brusque, and sometimes we can be very, right? But he had to learn to manage that. He had to learn how to deal with different people on different levels. And I say to you today, are you learning to manage? Are you learning to figure out what you need to figure out? because between the start and the finish, there's a whole lot of learning left there to do. There's a whole lot of learning for you to figure out. We only have a few minutes left, right? And I just want to know, at what point do you think you will win? Because inside of his mind is a complex series of thoughts. But when you look at it, he gets all his thoughts and he kind of slides them into the right file. That's kind of like how our minds are designed to work. He just works his according to the design. Is your mind working according to the design? Have you allowed situations and circumstances and substances to interrupt the flow of your mind? Your mind is your computer. That's what powers you up. That's what files everything away. That's what finds solutions to the issues that you face. But your mind is crowded by trauma from stuff that happened in our childhood that we never got treated for. Our minds become affected by substances. We smoke, we drink, we take drugs. Ruin the best thing about you, your mind. So many people started taking drugs from way too early, started smoking way too early, start taking drugs way too early, right? Start drinking way too early. You got to be careful when you find yourself start needing a drink by the end of the day to power you down or to calm you down. You got to be careful because that's leading somewhere. That means a substance has taken you over and is now in control and is telling you how to chill, how to relax, how to do stuff. And people excuse it all away. I have to take my little wine because it helps me to stay calm. It helps me to power down. It's my little treat for myself. It's my own little form of self-care. You're better off doing some retail, go do some retail therapy. It's only going to hurt your bank account, but it's definitely not going to hurt your body, right? So feed your temple, right? And watch what you do, right? I kid you not. It's a fascinating documentary. I suggest you go and look it up. Inside the Mind of Bill Gates. It's available on Netflix. Go look it up and watch it. It has some interesting ideas about the implementation of new energy, some creative ideas. I thought they kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to nuclear energy and using some uranium that is sitting in a town in Kentucky somewhere that could be rehabilitated and revitalized to be used as a form of energy for the next 150 years. Are you kidding me? So we could get rid of coal, and coal kills 800,000 people a year? Man, I would run to that, right? Then he gave us some solutions why the Japanese nuclear crisis happened. It was because the tsunami created a tidal wave and the water went over the wall of the nuclear reactor, and the generators were on the ground floor. So the water went into the generators and it built the pressure up, and boom. And people thought the nuclear reactor exploded because the nuclear reactor was malfunctioning. No. Do you see what I mean? So on this and other stuff. So what I'd like you to do is to think on these things. Inside the minds of Bill Gates, think for your own processes. Think about what you need to do, plan it out, execute it, have a plan of implementation, a plan of execution, and a plan of sustaining it, right? Make sure you do that and think about these things. And for more information on our show, go to harrietkammack.com. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Join us again on this, your favorite podcast station, as we continue to explore matters that are simply down to earth. Be blessed, everybody. Thanks so much. Oh my God. Why is the mouse not working today? Oh, oh my goodness. Why is the mouse not working today? Oh my goodness. Oh, are you kidding?